What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Ice Earn podcast, the podcast talking all things PWHL. My name is Heidi. I'm a huge hockey fan. Full disclosure, I am a Fleet crew member. It feels like I've been gone for 20 years. I think maybe it's been 3 weeks, maybe a month. We'll see if I remember how to do this. I am back to give everybody a quick recap on what the heck is going on with expansion and a preview of the 2026 entry draft that will be taking place on Wednesday up in Detroit. Now, if you're anything like me, you looked at the expansion rules and your mind immediately became a pretzel. You vaguely understand what the premise was, and then things actually happened and it did not match how you interpreted the rules at all. And like I said, if that's you, I'm right there with you. If you perfectly understood the rules and knew exactly what was going to happen and how it would work, congratulations, you are much smarter than I am. I've been riding the wave of these expansion announcements, vaguely following rumors, even though, I don't put a ton of stock in rumors. I like to keep at least an ear out to see what people are thinking. It sounds to me like a lot of fans are just spinning tales in their own heads, and then things come out and it's different than what a lot of people expected. Different moves, different players going places, different players staying places. So I'll give you the big picture and break down little pieces of it that I can understand, and hopefully we'll be at least on kind of the right page by the time that the next phase 4, begins on Monday, tomorrow, today, whatever day this episode goes up, probably will have already started. The first step for existing teams was to name 3 players that they wanted to protect from being taken by expansion teams. And I don't know if I mentioned this previously, but it should be noted that the way that the league has structured this expansion this time around, they're trying to really limit how many players will be moved without their input. It sounds to me like they worked with the Players Association to make sure that this happened. Obviously, it's a lot different off-season than last year. The free agent market is flooding. A lot of players were signed through this year, last season, so there really weren't enough free agents to fill out 2 extra teams. Like I said, not the case this year. But at the same time, they don't want, it seems, to have to force players into a new market if they don't want to go. I don't know that they've been 100% successful with that based on some rumors that have exploded on the internet, but I do at least appreciate the effort that seems to have gone in there. So the first step, like I said, protecting 3 players. For Boston, only somewhat surprisingly, it was Keller, Frankel, and Hailey Wynn. The only real surprise for me, and it was not even a mild surprise, was that it was Wynn over Alina Mueller. In Danielle Marmer's press conference, she was super emotional about recounting how she had to tell Mueller that it was not going to be her that was protected. And obviously that shows a lot of care for the team and for the people, not just the player on the ice, but the person. And I understand the decision. It doesn't make it sting any less that Mueller was exposed, because Mueller is just such an integral part of the Fleet and has been since the start. Hailey Wynn is the future, but Mueller is the now. So it was tough as a Boston fan there. But as Marmer said, it was kind of a 50-50 shot whether it was going to be Wynn or whether it was going to be Mueller that they protected. And I think in the end, she just decided that it had to be the future, and it had to be Wynn, because Wynn is our future. So it was a little devastating, especially considering later news, but we move on. Next team, Minnesota. Not really surprising here at all. Panik, Heidi, and Rooney. Notably, Panik was left exposed in the last expansion draft and somehow got overlooked, and they really got away with one there. Panik would have been an incredible pickup for Seattle, especially in hindsight. Vancouver could have benefited a lot as well, but instead last year they protected Coyne Schofield, which is totally understandable. This year, leaving her exposed again is a little bit surprising, but I think there are several factors in why that would be. And I don't want to just spout nonsense that as my interpretation, because I don't actually know, because I don't know Coin Schofield personally, but I can theorize that it has to do with, I hate to say it, but unfortunately age being a factor and also family life being a factor. But Panic, Heidi, Rooney, none of those players are all that surprising. Montreal went with the same players as last time, Poulin, Stacey, Desbiens, and you really can't do anything else but that in the initial process. Those are the cornerstones of the team. Had they left any of them exposed, I think the city might have burned to the ground. New York, not really a surprise here either. Fillier, Koltunkova, and O'Brien. Obviously, Fillier and Koltunkova are going to be the driving offensive factors in the next couple of years or in the future, like they are the team. Fillier is certainly a candidate for the next captain. The only, not even surprise really, but the wild card for me would have been O'Brien. O'Brien obviously is a great player and is another one who is going to be the future of the team. I just think that third spot was less clear than the first two, if that makes sense. Ottawa went for Leslie, Phillips, and Savalainen. The biggest surprise here was Leslie. And on the one hand, I do understand why they did it. Her success this season was absolutely fundamental in carrying them into playoffs. She was one of the few really reliable forwards that Ottawa had. Obviously, Phillips and Savalainen. Phillips, you cannot expose, same as Frankel. And Savalainen is such a stalwart on the back end. And for a team that really did not impress defensively, they need at least one solid defender like Savalainen to build around. So those two were obvious. But Leslie is more of a wild card. She kind of came out of nowhere this season. And as I said throughout the year, I don't know how much of it has to do with her individual talents as much as like her chemistry with her line, especially Brianne Jenner. Leaving Brianne Jenner exposed in this is a gamble, I think. Gambling whether or not Leslie is capable of, leading the team and scoring the way that she did this year without the line mate with whom they shared, I think, the vast majority of points. I'm kind of just like spewing that out there without having numbers in front of me, but I don't think I'm wrong here. Splitting Leslie and Jenner, I'm not sure will pay off in the long run. So I have to wonder if you were going to expose Jenner anyway, whether or not it would benefit the charge to have exposed both Leslie and Jenner in favor of protecting a young and talented player like Kadyrova or Gabby Hughes. They're not like the youngest players in the league, but they are still going to be the future of the Ottawa Charge. So just a question mark for me there. Seattle is kind of, I don't know how I feel about Seattle's Alex Carpenter, Hannah Murphy, and Anna Wilgren. Carpenter, obvious, done and done. You have to protect Alex Carpenter. I don't know how accurate this is, but it seems to me that Alex Carpenter is super happy in Seattle. Her face barely gives anything away ever, but when there's videos of her at the Seattle Zoo on social media, you can just see her face light up. And I think if you took her away from that, she might not be the same player. Hannah Murphy, I think, is another interesting choice because Corrine Schroeder is such a proven goaltender. She's had such a tough go of teams and teams in front of her that expose her to a ton of shots that don't do anything for her numbers, but it doesn't mean that she's not a great goaltender. She is national team quality. She's been there, done that before. So choosing the younger Hannah Murphy, who is a solid goalie, but I don't know that she quite matches Schroeder's talent right now, is an interesting choice. Obviously, younger means she could be in Seattle for a lot longer, but I don't know. Will that pay off for them considering all of the other changes that are happening in the offseason for them? I don't know. And Anna Wilgren was also a little, maybe not the choice that I would have made. Solid defender. I think she had a quietly decent season this year. She wasn't wowing me with any of her plays, but she was solid and doing what she could do defensively. So in that way, I understand it. But I think leaving a lot of offensive players exposed could also hurt them. I don't know. Seattle's a weird one for me, but I can understand why that was the choice. Toronto protected Fast, Kirk, and Shelton. I'm not surprised whatsoever by this. I don't think that I need to go over how Fast was the best defender on Toronto or how Reagan Kirk has proved herself to be a solid starting goaltender, nor that Ella Shelton is one of the best offensive defenders in the league. Is it kind of interesting that they didn't protect a forward? Yes, but at the same time, I think they kind of needed an offensive overhaul anyway, considering they struggled to score all season long, especially towards the end. So I do understand why that was the move. Last but not least, Vancouver protected Sarah Nurse, Sophie Jakes, and Emmerance Mashmeyer. Another team that's not really that surprising at all. Sarah Nurse, despite all of her injuries throughout the years, has been one of the better forwards in the league, one of the best on the Vancouver team. So gotta protect her. Sophie Jakes is the backbone of Vancouver defense and can also provide offense as well. And Mashmeyer is the starter. I mean, no shade to Campbell, but Mashmeyer was the number one, and rightfully so. So with those players protected, the second phase, I believe, started, which was the start of team signings for the new expansion teams. And these included what was called expansion foundational offers, or EFOs, and foundational player offers, or FPOs. And that's stupid acronyms, and I'm so sorry about it, but they are kind of important here. An expansion foundational offer were offers that a player could not refuse if only one team offered it to them. So it was like if player A was approached with an expansion foundational offer, EFO, and that was the only team, player A now plays for that team. Now, they could only sign, I think, one of them each, and 3 of the 4 teams used that option. The only team who did not exercise their right to utilize the expansion foundational player was Hamilton. So that's super interesting, and I'll go into that more in a minute. The other type of contract that we saw during phase 2 were foundational player offers, or FPOs, which were different in that the players had the choice to say no if they wanted to. There's like asterisks all over the place and like certain clauses that are bound to that, and I'll try my best to summarize that in a second. But basically, players who were approached with these specific contracts had the ability to say no, with the caveat that they had to sign with another team in phase 3. So during phase 2, they could say yes or no. During phase 3, they have to pick a team. They do not have a choice in the matter. And I think all of the players with these had to be on expiring contracts for the year. And that's where my brain was in a pretzel, and I didn't quite understand what was going on with the EFOs and the FPOs and contracts status. It was all super confusing to me. So I'm not the right person to explain any of that. So here we go with the expansion signings, starting with Detroit. Detroit started with their EFO expansion foundational player, Daryl Watts, and then signed Kayla Barnes, Hannah Bilka, Britta Curl, Jessie Confer, Sydney Bard, and Taylor Gerard. Of these, the least surprising was Taylor Gerard, as the only Michigander currently signed with Detroit. I think a lot of people were slightly surprised by one particular signing in here. Off-ice stuff obviously matters, but At the end of the day, it is a business and business decisions have to be made. Regardless of personal beliefs, a good player is a good player, and that is valuable to a business. So in that way, it makes sense. She is a good player. But I also understand how this is super upsetting for those who are new fans of Detroit or were Minnesota fans who lived closer to Detroit and wanted to support Detroit. And she traveled with them. So I totally understand it and I feel for you, but I just need everybody to take a breath. If you're upset about this, you're totally right to be upset. You're totally allowed to be upset, but I need everybody to take a breath and just remember that one player does not constitute an entire team. One player's personal beliefs does not reflect necessarily the views of the rest of the team, the other players on the team, the front office of the team, the management of the team. It doesn't reflect that. Could it be an aspect? Sure, but we don't know that for sure. Personally, I'm of the belief that when you're in a situation like this, the best thing that you can do is just not give any oxygen to that person. The more attention you draw to it, the more other people are going to support them potentially. And oftentimes, the more they dig their heels in. All that being said, Detroit fans, you are allowed to feel your feelings and they're all valid. And to everyone else who has feelings and opinions about it, one player does not constitute the entire team or city of Detroit. So just calm down. Up next is Las Vegas. And they utilized their EFO, their binding contract, on Hillary Knight. And it is slightly surprising. Hillary Knight being taken by an expansion team for the second year in a row is not surprising. What is surprising is the fact that this came with the rumor that there's a handshake deal between Vegas and Detroit that they're going to trade Knight during the draft for a draft pick because Knight doesn't want to play in Vegas. That's what I've heard. That's the rumor. I don't know if it's true or not. We're going to find out on draft night just like everybody else. But if that's true, that's kind of wild. And I don't know how we would know that unless somebody's like remote accessing Knight's phone or something. I don't know. So watch and see for that one. I don't know. It's an interesting one. Las Vegas was also the last of the 4 teams to announce even one signing during this period. And they took their sweet time, but I think they really cooked with their first 2 signings, which were May Batherson and Kendall Cooper from Minnesota. May Batherson, as I've brought up before, is a favorite of Natalia, who is in the Discord. She writes for the 9 Sports. She's very, very high on May Batherson. She's got great numbers, but she's considered one of the best defenders in the league by all those metrics. So I think Las Vegas picked some good ones there. Cooper, I liked last season. I think she was a promising young player. So Minnesota lost out there, unfortunately. Vegas continued to cook, though, as they then signed Erin Ambrose and Haley Skamura from Montreal. Erin Ambrose is another shocking signing here. Obviously, she was exposed and Montreal had to take the risk to protect the other 3 players, but yeah, I never thought I would see Erin Ambrose wear anything other than maroon and tan. So to the desert she goes with fellow teammate Haley Skamura, who is a valuable player towards the end of the regular season and obviously in the playoffs as well. Just really exploded, and it was about time in my opinion. So we'll see what they do in Vegas. The last 2 were Megan Carter and Nicole Hensley. Hensley, another surprise to me just because, you know, she and Rooney seemed like such a package deal. I never thought that I would see them out of a tandem with each other. So again, Hensley being exposed left that door open. And if it's playing time that she's after, hopefully Vegas gives her that time and treats her well. Hamilton is, as I said, the only team who chose to not exercise the right for that binding contract. Instead, they opted for all voluntary contracts, the FPOs, I believe. They started off really strong. Brianne Jenner, who again was a player I never thought I would see leave her original team. Never thought I'd see her out of the red and yellow. Was exposing her the right choice for Ottawa. I guess we're going to see. Hamilton also signed goalie Kaylee Osborne from New York. It's a solid signing. It's a big loss for New York, but Osborne's done very, very well for herself in the last couple of years. So deserving of potentially a better team in front of her than New York. Most devastating for me personally, Hamilton signed Alina Mueller. I'm not surprised, but I am incredibly disappointed. I think the moving of coaches in the offseason that I'll touch on in a minute was a big factor here, which I totally understand because it seems like a lot of the culture from the Fleet this year was having to do with coaching, and I can't say that I would blame her for wanting to follow Chris Barr in there. So not surprised, just very disappointed. And Mueller will be welcome back in Boston at any time, just not wearing any other color than green. They wrapped up the phase 3. They wrapped up this phase by signing Nicole Gosling, Emily Clark, and Zoe Boyd. Nicole Gosling obviously is a Rookie of the Year contender, so it's a big loss for Montreal again. She's going to be there for a long time. She's a young player. She's got longevity in her favor. She's shown incredible maturity on the puck, so building around her, I think, is going to go pretty well for them. And Emily Clark wasn't her best season this year, but she's capable of big things, and she's a gritty player. She may not, like I said, rack up the points all the time, but you pretty much know what you're getting every time she steps on the ice. She's a very consistent player in that sense. And Zoe Boyd, we'll miss her personality in Boston, but didn't get a ton of playing time this year because of her injury and then unfortunate other injury. So we'll see how she does in Hamilton. I think we've seen that she can do well under Chris Barr's systems as long as she's paired with another decent defender. In Ottawa, we saw that she was prone to making some boneheaded moves unless, again, paired with the right partner. So this might be a case of finding the right person to pair her with, or she could come into her own all by herself in Hamilton. Who's to say? And finally, San Jose, kind of, I wouldn't say random assortment, but kind of a random assortment of players here, starting with the foundational player, or the binding player, Kristen O'Neill. I'm not sure what the strategy is here. Kristen O'Neill's a solid player for sure. I would take her on my team if that was an option. But I don't know that I would take her as like a must have. And that's what that says to me. So I'm wondering what Troy Ryan is thinking here. Obviously, there's something cooking in his brain that he saw that he wants, but I'm not seeing the vision yet. Other players taken for San Jose are Corrine Schroeder, which when I talked about Seattle, this is what I kind of knew was going to happen when they protected Murphy over her. So hopefully she gets a better team in front of her with more defense so she doesn't have to work as hard. Rory Gilday being one of her defenders, I think, is a good sign. Gilday, I think, is a player that, not that she gets carried away, but I think she's a very physical player who toes the line quite often, and we'll see. They also signed Ann Cherkowski and Maddie Wheeler from New York, who solid young players. I think middle two lines for sure. Depending on who they're paired with, I think they could do really well. They'll develop into really good players. Hadley Hartmetz from Boston, a defender. Not a name that I would have expected to be taken in this round, but yeah, sure, why not? Finally, Maggie Connors and Maureen Murphy. Murphy's a solid loss for Montreal, as is Connors for Toronto. Maybe not the top marquee players on those teams, but definitely contributed quite a bit and were very consistent throughout the season. So San Jose is shaping up to be an interesting one. I don't know I don't know if this is going to be another Vancouver-Seattle situation where the star-studded teams kind of flop and maybe San Jose and their kind of midline team, other than Rory Gilday, I would say, and Schroeder, succeed. I don't know. That'll be super interesting, but we're not done yet. And just to add on before I move on to the next phase, 3 of the 4 teams have head coaches. Obviously, San Jose announced GM and coach at the same time, being Troy Ryan for whatever reason. Still trying to figure that one out. But Detroit and Hamilton also announced their head coaches. Chris Spar for Hamilton, which is a devastating loss for Boston. I think I speak for the majority of Boston fans when I say that we loved Spar. Spar had everything we could ever want in a coach. He brought the team together. His systems were working for the most part. He didn't run the power play, so we can't blame that on him. He built up an already great culture into something that players don't want to leave. He was a quote machine. He just has the best things to say about the team. He's funny. It's just everything we wanted in a coach. That was Chris Spar. And so losing him to an expansion team is not quite as devastating as losing Alina Mueller, but definitely a hit. Detroit, with much less fanfare, signed Josh Skiba as their coach. And I hope I said that right. I probably should have looked that up before, but I don't really know much about him. He is most known for coaching men's hockey, so we'll see how that goes. There are other coach signings for the other teams. I know Boston signed a new coach, Seattle signed a new coach, Vancouver, I think, signed a new coach, so they're not the expansion teams, so I didn't even write them down. After the initial signings, teams were given another 3 player spots to protect. The players who rejected those foundational player offers, the non-binding contracts, during phase 2, now had to sign with a team. So just to give you the rundown on who those players were, Izzy Daniel from Vancouver, Callie Flanagan from Toronto, Jen Gardner from Vancouver, Julia Gosling from Seattle, Susanna Tapani from Boston, and Grace Zumwinkle from Minnesota. The only one I think even made me lift an eyebrow was Callie Flanagan. I have a feeling that was for San Jose. I don't have any basis for that, but that's just my feeling. So those players had to sign either with the team that they are already with or with a new team during phase 3. If the teams of those players wanted to re-sign them and protect them, they could do so in this phase. So, for example, phase 3 protections from Boston were Susanna Tapani, Shea Maloney, and Abby Newhook. They all signed new contracts at least through next year. I think Tapani and Maloney, I think, are 2 years, or maybe it was Newhook, but thank God Tapani is staying. I think listeners who have been here for a while know how I feel about Tapani, and I'm very glad to see her stay in Boston. Seeing her on the list of players who rejected a contract elsewhere warms my little Boston heart, and I'm very glad that we're able to keep her and protect her. And Maloney and Newhook, also solid protections. I would love to protect our whole team, but I understand how this works. Minnesota similarly re-signed and protected Zumwinkle, who also rejected a contract, and then Lee Steckline and Sydney Morin. With defense being one of their pain points this year, Steckline was an obvious choice, and Sydney Morin, especially after her playoff performance, was another fairly easy choice. And then Grace Zumwinkle, how could you not? Especially when she rejected an expansion team. I'm not surprised by any of these, and considering all the other players that Minnesota lost, I think that these players will at least keep some hope alive for those fans. Montreal was much more interesting than I expected. They did lose a bunch of solid players to expansions already, so in that way it makes sense. But protecting Flaherty was not the choice that I would have made personally. She came through in clutch moments during playoffs, sure, but she is a bit of a liability, so I'm not sure that I would not sure that I would want that. She's averaging a suspension a year, and I would prefer to have 0 suspensions on my team. Thank you. The other two, slightly less surprising. Lena Ljungblom, she's not the most point productive person on the team, but she is solid and consistent. And Katie Tabin, obviously not Erin Ambrose, but she's also solid and can score in key moments. Liable for some penalties, but nothing like Flaherty, so this one makes much more sense for me. New York went with Bourbonnais, Maya Naylor-Persson, and Micah Zandyhart. I mean this in like the nicest way possible, but I feel like New York probably could have left the entire rest of their team exposed and not gotten touched. Not that they're bad players at all. Bourbonnais is solid. Naylor-Persson had an off year this year, but her rookie year was really good on the back end. And Zandyhart, I think she's the core of the New York team, but she's also not like, she's like very quietly good at her job. So I don't know that she would have been, I mean, I guess she'd be on the radar, but not like a highly sought after player in that regard. So no offense to New York or these players, they're all solid, but I think there were just bigger names in the cards that I think would have been chosen over any of these players. But I mean, I guess if I needed to protect any of the other players on New York after Fillier, Calty, and O'Brien, I guess those three make sense. Ottawa chose Hughes, Kadyrova, and Sarah Wisniewicz. No surprises there. Hughes probably going to be captain next year, I would think. Maybe Savalainen, but I feel like it's Hughes. Kadyrova, after all she did this year, how would you not? And same with Wisniewicz. Wisniewicz she was tied for the most game winners with Rebecca Leslie, as I recall. That's a bright future for Ottawa there. Seattle picked Gosling, Grant Mentis, and Serdachny. Again, not really surprising. Gosling had to get signed because of the rejected FPO. Grant Mentis, I think she's one of those players that I don't know that she would have been picked up by another team because she's solid, but she's not like flashy. And she didn't have like the best season this year, but she's definitely capable. Serdachny, I think, pretty much speaks for herself. Toronto protected Flanagan, Gentry, and Spooner. Flanagan had to get re-signed to be protected. She's one of those with the FPO rejection. And Gentry was a decent rookie. She didn't wow me, but I think for Toronto, like they kind of need all of the forwards that they can really get at this point. So why not protect the future there? And Spooner, again, another player that I don't know that she needed the protection after 2 fairly lackluster seasons, especially in comparison to the inaugural season. I don't know that she'd be one to get picked, but here we are. And finally, Vancouver protected Daniel, who had the rejected FPO, Gardner, who had the same, and Hannah Miller. And I don't think any of those are surprising to anybody either. With all of those protections in mind, Phase 4 starts Sunday the 14th, so today, and goes through Monday the 15th. Basically, this phase is just free agency for the expansion teams only. Each team needs to reach 10 contracted signed players for their team. If any teams cannot sign whatever number of players they need to reach 10, there will be a player protection process, which to my understanding seems to be a draft. The players who are eligible to be taken in that process would be, quote, those not signed or protected in phases 1 to 3, including players on expiring contracts and players under contract for 26-27. Existing teams can lose a maximum of 4 players who are under contract for the 26-27 season in phases 1 to 4. Unquote. So editing Heidi here, I had a whole section already recorded in here about how some teams had already lost the correct number of player or the maximum number of players, and they'd be done or not done depending. And I realized as I was editing it, and spoiler alert, it's Monday when I'm editing this, and teams were still losing players, that I had it entirely wrong. And they can only lose 4 contracted players, I think is my interpretation of it now. So I just went ahead and deleted that entire section so I didn't sound like a complete fool. I already sound like one enough. I don't need to pile onto myself here. So just wanted to give you a quick note as to why this section seems so weird and abrupt. And it's because I'm just an idiot with a microphone and I'm just yapping. So I'll let you get back to it. Pretend this never happened. Bye. And now, enough of expansion, because my brain can only handle so much complicated stuff for so long. And moving into the 2026 entry draft on Wednesday night up in Detroit, I have some predictions and just a quick, overview of players that I have my eye on and other people have their eyes on. But before I start, as of recording, we don't know the exact draft order after the gold plan teams. So Vancouver number 1, Seattle number 2, New York number 3, Toronto number 4. That's all we know. After that, 5 through 12 is up in the air. So I made my predictions under the assumption that the existing 8 would go first in order of gold plan, and then 5 through 8 would be the order they were knocked out of playoffs. So Minnesota, Boston, Ottawa, Montreal. And then from there, the last 4, since it's so nebulous and I didn't want to try to pretzel my brain anymore and trying to figure out what order they might be in or what combination of order they could be in. I focused more on what the team has already and what they would be looking for versus like what number I think X player is actually going to get drafted at. More focused on who would be drafting them versus the number, if that makes sense. So starting from the top, I think the top 2 are pretty undisputed. What order they go in is up for debate, but I think the prevailing opinion right now is that KK Harvey is going first overall. She's a defender from New Hampshire / Massachusetts, from my neck of the woods. And I think she's going number 1 overall as well. So she's going to Vancouver. Number 2, I think, is going to be Abby Murphy, a forward. She's going to Seattle. I don't remember if I've talked about her before, but what you need to know about Abby Murphy is that she is an incredibly talented player who is an incredibly loose cannon. I'm not entirely sure what the deal is, but there's something about her. I don't know if it's like a brain thing. I don't know if it's an impulse control thing. I'm not sure what it is, but there's something about Abby Murphy that makes her lay incredibly reckless and often dangerous hits on other players, like some damaging hits in the NCAA that honestly I'm kind of surprised she didn't get like banned for life type things. Like the frequency was enough where I feel like it could be. I think the reason that she goes number 2 is not only because her talent is just so exceptional, like she's incredibly talented. Don't want to take that away from her. She plays for Team USA and she has demonstrated playing in international tournaments with much stricter physicality rules that she is capable of reining herself in to like not injuring other players. But if given even like the slightest bit of leash, like she was at the University of Minnesota, she's gonna just annihilate people. With the new coach in Seattle, I have no idea if that's going to be the case or not. I have no idea. So it's a real wild card. She's an interesting player. Personally, I'm glad Boston is likely not going to be in a position to potentially draft her because we don't need any more players who will give us the reputation of Boston bullies. After that, I think picks 3 through 6 could really go in any order of each other, but this is my interpretation. I think Tessa Janicki, a center from the University of Pennsylvania, is going to the Sirens at number 3. They need forwards. Janicki is an exceptionally talented center, easily the best in the draft class at center. So I think that's an easy one there. Layla Edwards is another incredible talent who could go 3, but could also drop to 6 even. It just really depends. She is listed on the declaration sheet as a defender, but she has historically played forward for most of her career. She's only started playing defense in the last year, I think. She played some defense for the University of Wisconsin this year, and then she played defense at the Olympics alongside Megan Keller. And Megan Keller could make a rock look like an incredible defender, like a pebble, not even a big rock, like a pebble look like a great defender when you're paired up with Megan Keller. So not saying that she can't be a great defender, but just saying that that's historically not her position. So whether she plays at forward or defense, who's to say? But I think she's going number 4 to Toronto. And I think Toronto could do well to use her as a forward. But if she's adamant that she wants to play as a defender, as I've heard might be the case, she could drop lower because I think she's more valuable as a forward than she is a defender. Number 5, I have as Kirsten Sims going to Minnesota. Sims is another U.S. national team player who plays on the wings. She's one of the highest scoring players in NCAA history, as if Minnesota needs any more weapons. Though after this offseason, maybe they need to rebuild just a little bit. Number 6, I have as Lacey Eden going to Boston. Eden, another U.S. women's national team player who did not go to the Olympics this year, but has gone to world championships in years past and has done a really solid job. Her NCAA stats are actually remarkably similar to Kirsten Sims, so easily these two players could be flipped. Personally, I'd be happy with either one of them, as they are both known goal scorers, and Boston desperately needs that. At number 7, this is where a lot of opinions start to differ within the rankings online, and I'll link the articles of two writers who I really value their opinions of, Kyle Cushman and Natalia Rockman. I tried my hardest to come up with my own opinions and not copy their work, but they were two that I really respect their opinions and I take into consideration. There were a couple others that I took note of, Ian Kennedy being one of them, just as a source material. So a lot of these names I gathered from these lists and kind of looked up myself and kind of familiarized myself a little bit with how they play and what their responsibilities and their roles are, what they're good at, what their strengths are, and matched that with the team that I think might need the most. So number 7, I have as Nelly Leitinen, a defender who would be going to Ottawa. She is a member of the Finnish national team, so she will fit right in with Savolainen on the back end. And Ottawa, despite losing some scoring so far in the expansion, desperately needed better defense. And maybe it's a structural issue, but I feel like having another really strong defender with Savolainen, whether paired with her or just being the number 2, the more senior member of the second pairing, if that makes sense, could do really well for Ottawa. At number 8, I have Elisa Holopainen from Finland, a forward, going to Montreal. This one's a little bit harder. Holopainen is a winger. Not that Montreal is lacking in depth, even after this offseason, but I think Montreal could do more with their depth. And I think having a really strong player on that second line could make their games less defensive and more offensive. So they're not that they relied on Sapien whatsoever, because their defense was just so solid. But if they could score more, they wouldn't need to play such a defensive game. So this one was kind of up in the air, but I feel like Holopainen might just be the best option out of the bunch at this current moment. Now for the expansion teams, for Detroit, I have Andrea Brandley, a goalie from the Swiss national team. She played in Europe previously, and it seemed like she was going to stay playing in the Swedish league for the foreseeable future. It sounded like she wanted nothing to do with the PWHL for a couple of years now, despite the fact that she's done exceptionally well for the Swiss national team in World Championships as well as in the Olympics this year. Incredibly talented goaltender that will be an easy starter. And Detroit is the only one who did not take a goalie in the signing period. So they desperately need a goalie. And I think my interpretation of them doing that is that they might be waiting to draft Brandley, assuming that she's open for the whatever slot that they get in the draft. A lot of other people online have ranked Brandley a lot lower. And I think if Detroit picks up a goalie in phase 4, then that actually makes a lot of sense. And I'm just dumb, but that's my interpretation of it. I have Las Vegas picking up Petra Nieminen, a center from Finland. Las Vegas has a bunch of solid options, especially defensively. They needed offense, and with the rumor of Hillary Knight not wanting to play in Vegas, I think they could even get a higher pick for someone like Kirsten Sims or a Tessa Janicki even to get more of that offense, or maybe 2 picks, maybe another in the second round, who's to say, but assuming there's no trades actually happening, they still do need offense, so Nieminen makes sense there. Hamilton, I have as Emma Pichel, a defender, for the simple fact that Hamilton picked up 2 defenders in the signing period thus far, Nicole Gosling and Zoe Boyd, and that's not quite enough. And Pichel has showed herself to be one of the best defenders in the NCAA. So why not add a young player to the mix to grow with Nicole Gosling on the back end? And last on the first round, I have San Jose picking up Vivi Vainikka, a forward from Finland. I think San Jose and Hamilton kind of need defense as much as each other, but Hamilton goes first in the alphabet, so they got Emma Pichel. The second round, this is, again, pretty muddy. There's no real consensus around the scouts and reporters, but there are names that come up over and over again in between the late first round and second round who I've kind of adjusted to what I think each team needs. Starting back with Vancouver, Alyssa Biederman, a forward. Obviously, Vancouver is stacked on the back end, and with there just being more forwards generally, they need another talented forward to work with Miller and to work with Nurse. So add another young one to the mix, and hopefully that'll produce more offense for Vancouver next season. Seattle needs defense. They need a lot of things, but they really need defense, so they're not giving up a bunch of goals on poor Hannah Murphy again. So I have them picking up Sydney Morrow at number 14, a defender. Morrow, I've seen go higher on some lists, and then some drop her down towards like 20 or even in the 20s. So could go anywhere. At number 15, I have a goaltender, which might be maybe wishful thinking on my part. New York needs a starting goaltender, and no offense to her, but I don't think Callie Shanahan is that player. I think Tia Chan from UConn is the player who could become the New York starting goaltender. She is incredible. For anybody who's listened to the podcast the last couple of years, I really started following her in 2024. I think it was 2024, when the UConn Huskies matched up with the Northeastern Huskies in the Hockey East Finals. It was Tia Chan against none other than Gwyneth Phillips. What an incredible showdown between those two goaltenders. And it really, truly was a goalie duel. There was a called back goal in that matchup that went in UConn's favor, and UConn ended up winning that game. But to go toe to toe, more or less, with Gwyneth Phillips and come out on top says a lot to me. This last year, she played out of her mind. She had so many highlight reel saves. Again, I'm from Connecticut, so maybe this is a bit of hometown bias, but I think Tia Chan is incredibly valuable and could do very well for any team that she goes to. But I think that New York needs a goalie bad enough that they will draft her in the second round. A lot of the times, goalies will drop a lot lower in the draft order, so she could go in the third, fourth, fifth round, who's to say, but personally, I would take her in the second. At number 16, Toronto once again needs forwards desperately, so I have them as picking up Izzy Wonder, a center. She is I'm not going to make the obvious joke, but she is a very strong forward from, I believe it was Princeton. She's had highlight reels all season, the last couple of seasons. And to me, could go higher, but could also drop down lower, just depending on who she's paired with. Wonder, I think, could learn a lot from a more veteran player like Natalie Spooner. So she may not be the answer for Toronto's woes in the immediate, but I think she's a player who could really grow into develop into a franchise player. From here, it's names I'm much less familiar with, but who have been mentioned repeatedly by reporters and scouts as, kind of lingering between the second round and the third round. Some have them as high as first round, but for the most part, not as much. Minnesota, again, I think whether they need it or not, I think they're going to be rebuilding the offense that they may not even lose in the offseason, and they're going to go with center Lily Shannon. They need defense too, but I feel like they're more likely to go for somebody in free agency than to draft them. But hey, I could be wrong. At number 18, I have Sloan Matthews, a center. Again, Boston desperately needs forwards, especially at center. So picking up a center in the second round just makes perfect sense. This could also be Lily Shannon. They could be flipped. At 19, I have Grace Dwyer going to Ottawa, a defender. Once again, Ottawa desperately needs defense and solid defense, and Grace Dwyer, by all accounts, seems to fit that bill pretty well. At number 20, I have defender Vivian Jungles going to Montreal. Losing Erin Ambrose and Julia Gosling has left a gaping hole in Montreal's defense, and they need to triage that. Maybe a defender in the first round would be the move, but I don't know that they'd go for that. So I think a defender in the second round makes sense too. Moving into the expansion teams, I have Detroit picking up defender Jules Constantinople. They only signed 2 defenders so far, only Kayla Barnes and Sydney Bard, who are, Barnes is number 1. I would say Bard is more of a second or third pairing. I think Constantinople might start on the third line, but seems to be responsible enough to potentially move up to number 2 or second pairing in the not too distant future. Hamilton, I have picking up Aviatum, a defender. Once again, Hamilton needs more defenders, and between them and San Jose, this could be flipped, same as the first round, because San Jose I have as picking up Swedish forward Thea Johansson, and she wowed on the international stage. I think it was a question of whether or not she wanted to come to the PWHL, but here's the answer. And I think Troy Ryan maybe learned a bit from this year in Toronto about not being able to score. So I feel like he might try to go for more forwards to get that offense. Are these the players to do it? I don't know. I'm just an idiot with a microphone. So those are my predictions for the first 2 rounds. Take them with a grain of salt, because who am I to say? Some other players to watch just really quick before I wrap it all up. There are 2 goalies who I think have a really strong chance of being drafted. If they somehow don't go drafted, I think they absolutely get training camp invites from at least one team each. Katie Dessau and Emma Sophie Nordstrom. Obviously, goalies have a rough go of it in the drafts because there are so many goalies who are starting material out there already. So like Hensley getting a number 1 slot on a new team, that's taken away a spot from one of these new goalies. It's that kind of thing. But the talent pool is starting to thin enough where drafting a backup goalie is not a bad idea whatsoever. The real question, I think, in terms of whether or not they start in the PWHL next season or not, depends on how much playing time they really want out of their career. I think Nordstrom especially might want to see more playing time and opt for the Swedish League next year if she doesn't get drafted, just because she's Denmark's number 1 goaltender for the foreseeable future. She's literally the future of Team Denmark. So I think she probably would want more playing time there. Kind of like Peslarova last year wanted more playing time over in Sweden. Desa, I think, would be a solid backup who one day could become a starter in the league. But again, if she wants a ton of playing time, she may not opt for the PWHL. But if they get drafted, maybe they'll change their minds. 2 more players, 2 more skaters to keep an eye on who could really kind of go anywhere. One, Jade Aginla from Brown University, a forward. And if you recognize the last name Aginla, yes, she is Jerome Aginla's daughter. She was listed fairly differently between rankings. Kyle has her at number 16 overall, Natalia has her at number 28, and Kennedy has her at number 33. So I think she could go probably 2nd or 3rd round, but I don't know how she stacks up against a lot of the other forwards that I had ranked in the first 2 rounds. Then again, I also don't watch the NCAA, so maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe Kyle has inside baseball, so I think she could go anywhere. I think she's going to be drafted. It's just a matter of what round, what number. And the last player to watch is a forward from the University of Connecticut, Kyla Josefovic. This last year, she had an absolutely monster season with UConn after a pretty underwhelming underclassmen performance over the previous years. Natalia specifically, I remember saying she could have just launched herself into getting drafted when teams probably wouldn't have given her a second look just after her underclassmen seasons. But that's how good her senior season was. I didn't pull up the stats because I'm terrible at this. I don't make enough money for that. But she could be 3rd or 4th round. Again, maybe it's my UConn bias, but I could see her getting drafted easily before the 6th round and potentially be a solid bottom 6 for any team. Like I said, I will link specifically Kyle's and Natalia's rankings in the description so that you guys can take a look. Kyle had the rundown on a lot of players. Natalia gave her highlights, so definitely go check them out. Like I said, I value their opinions quite a lot. I'm toying with the idea of a live watch party on Wednesday night for the draft itself. Whether that materializes or not remains to be seen, but keep an eye out social media for that. Otherwise, I think this might be it for the year for me. I hope all of you enjoy the draft. If I don't talk to you draft night, wishing everybody a stress-free off-season, stress-free expansion process so that you all can enjoy your summers and not stress out about things that are completely out of our control. Don't forget to reach out to your community, do good things for your community, and most importantly, be kind to each other. I'll catch you guys in November. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure that you're subscribed on your preferred platform. You can also follow me on social media. You can find it at IceEarnedPod pretty much everywhere. If you want to support the show monetarily, feel free to check out the merch store linked in the description below, or join us on Patreon at patreon.com/IceEarnedPodcast. If you want to join the conversation on Discord, there is a link for that in the description as well. Shoot me an email at iceearnedpod@outlook.com. And until next time, be kind to each other.